Hello and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview, where we take a look at stories being followed in the upcoming edition of the North Coast Journal. I'm your host, Dave Frank, and I'm joined today by Thad Greenson, news editor, and Jennifer Fumiko-Cahill, arts and features editor. Welcome,
Hello.
Guys. Let's dive right in. Jennifer, what's on the cover of this week's North Coast Journal?
You know, it is a little break from the misery, but not too long a break. Don't get excited. We have a fantastic photo essay by Mark Larson, of whom we have spoken many times, because he's just this great, wonderful former HSU photography professor, by the way.
Oh,
and he goes everywhere. If there are events, if there are things going on in Humboldt that are, of import, either festivals, etc., or, even sometimes protests and things like that, Mark is there documenting it. And we've run a lot of his photos, but with shelter in place, not a lot going on. So Mark and his wife, Sydney, who is also fantastic, they decided that how they were going to keep themselves from getting completely stir crazy during shelter in place is to start going on walks every day, going hiking. And after a while, they realized, we keep on going to the same places. And so they made it a rule that they were going to go to all new places. And so
that's awesome.
They have been, they got out all these actual paper maps, which still exist.
Yeah.
And they also downloaded a bunch of stuff, and every day they're going out to new trails. So we have a small smattering of the photos in the paper, but a large smattering online, which will be up and available on Thursday. And I strongly suggest going through there because it's going to make you want to go outside. You might have to get in your car to get to some of these places, and you might have to hike a little bit to, make it to the actual trails, but it's absolutely worth it. They're beautiful pictures. It's almost enough to make me go outside.
Well, that's good to hear. I absolutely love hiking, and I go all over the place. What are some of the places that he shared with us?
He took one of the photos that kind of stayed with me is the Malel Dunes. He took this gorgeous sweeping shot of that, some ducks at the marsh. Ducks all literally in a row, which gives me a tremendous sense of order, and it's relaxing. Nice. Also, he took some beautiful photos of, which you'll see online. There are a couple photos of it in print, but especially online, there are some wonderful photos of the Eureka Waterfront Trail and kind of rust and train cars and all the things that we think of as eyesores. But when framed by an artist, suddenly you realize this has its own beauty. And the same thing with some, forest areas that are maybe not, our postcard photos, well-used trails, cemeteries. Mark has a real appreciation for the underappreciated.
Right on. So in the article, I think he shared with us a resource so that we could figure out where to go. I know there's redwoodhikes.com is available, but I think he mentioned a book. Can you share that with us?
Yes, Reese Hughes has written, he's a local hiking enthusiast and writer. He's actually written some things for the North Coast Journal over the years. And he has collected a book of a zillion different hikes. If you have ever walked anywhere, you have walked in Reese Hughes's footsteps, because my God, he's somewhere walking right now. I don't know. I'm not aware that he stops. Yeah, but it's a wonderful resource and really Humboldt focused. So absolutely enjoy that and, have the full local experience with a local guide.
So also really neat, he mentioned in this article that some things to keep in mind when you're hiking, especially people who say, hey, I'm going to follow his lead, I'm going to go do that. Some guide tips for us to keep in mind when we hike?
Yeah, including, having a phone with you, a smartphone. If you're going to go on a hike and you don't have a quarantine buddy, someone from your household that you can hike with, don't hike with other people who are outside your household. It's not time for that yet. But if you are, for example, hiking with, a spouse, a friend, whatever, that's great. If you are not, you should let somebody know where you're going so that we're not wondering when your mail starts piling up if anything happens. And also to make sure that you have something to eat, something to drink. Don't get dehydrated. Don't get bonky while you're walking out in the woods alone. But yeah, he just has some really standard good advice, including keeping a journal. And that can be either a photographic journal or a written journal, because eventually we're going to think, what the heck happened to this year of our lives, or however long this stretches? And this is a nice way to document and also to keep yourself feeling steady, feeling like, okay, my days do matter. I am not just, living on pause.
Well, awesome. I'm definitely going to check it out. Thank you, Jennifer. How about you, Thad? What have you been working on this week? What can you share with us?
Yeah, so last week we put out our second story under the Community Voices Coalition, which talked about last week, but it's the collaborative project with Humboldt Area Foundation, or funded through Humboldt Area Foundation. And this story looked at prisoners from Humboldt County in the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation who are being released back into Humboldt County amid a pandemic. So it's both, there's some inmates who are just due to be released and being let out, but the focus of the article is more on inmates who are being released early due to conditions within the prisons. And for our viewers and listeners who don't know, there's been a pretty massive COVID outbreak in state prisons. San Quentin alone, I think 2/3 of their prisoners, 2,000 people have been infected there. And I didn't address this in the story, but I've seen it in some comments and online questions and stuff. Inside the prisons, prisoners are masked. They're forced to wear masks all the time, and there are special COVID protocols in place. But it's just kind of impossible to practice social distancing and the kind of disinfectant needed in any prison situation, really, but especially in the California prisons, which even though they've reduced their populations under a federal mandate over the last 15 years, we're still about 30,000 prisoners above capacity of what the system was built for. So we have overcrowded prisons still, and COVID is spreading wildly. And so, the CDCR announced, I think back in March, that they were going to start releasing prisoners early, folks who had, just 60 days or fewer left on their sentences and met other criteria of being in for nonviolent offenses, not being sex offenders. I think there was a couple other things. And then this outbreak started just tearing through the prisons. And so they've really expedited both their timeline, and then now they're releasing folks who have 180 days or less left on their sentences. And so as one might imagine, with a giant prison bureaucracy, it's been a little bit slapdash and put together on the fly. And so our local officials actually got word heading into July 4th weekend that a number of prisoners were being released back in Humboldt County, including 2 who needed to be quarantined, one who had tested positive for COVID and another who had been exposed. And so the story really kind of looks at this, frantic effort on local officials' part to figure out how are we going to get these folks re-entered into their community, the community that they're coming back to, safely for them and for everybody else. And so they came up with this plan to basically quarantine them in a hotel, get them tested, and then have them monitored for 2 weeks. And that both included probation officials checking in on them twice a day and cold calling them and stuff to make sure they were actually quarantining and staying in their room. And then also public health officials checking in on them to make sure, that they weren't symptomatic, make sure they had anything they needed as far as food, delivered meals, delivered, personal items they needed and stuff like that.
I thought that from the sound of it, when I looked at your article, that it sounded like a success story. I mean, even though it was only a couple of people, it was a trial run where 2 different departments of the community government were able to get together and figure out how to manage this. Despite, obviously, like you said, there's some degree of imperfection that comes from short notice, but it seemed like a success story. Were there any elements of this that stood out to you that our community we're absorbing this well? Like it's a success story to you too?
Yeah, I think that when word first got out about this, there was a lot of kind of trepidation in the community, both from a crime standpoint and a public health standpoint. But our reporting is really kind of laid out that they've done everything right, it seems, county officials, and, and are really prepared for what they did with these couple inmates that came back and needed to be quarantined, to replicate that for 30 plus more that are anticipated to come out over the next couple months. And, Sean Brenneman, our local probation chief, I thought was really eloquent in the story and saying kind of that, these are members of our community, and they have made bad decisions, committed crimes. They've answered to a jury of their peers. They've been sentenced. They've served their time now, and it's incumbent on probation, but also the entire community, to do everything we can to give them that next chance and give them opportunity to stay healthy, A, and then B, make some good decisions and kind of correct course on their lives. I think that if there's anything that was kind of shortchanged in this process, it was really enabling probation to do its best work with these folks. Sean said that traditionally, when somebody's being released, they're doing regular video conferencing with probation officials for 2 months before they're returned home, and this process has just expedited that. So whereas instead of 2 months, they had 2 days to kind of prepare these folks for reentry into their communities. But I agree, it's a success story, I think.
Awesome. Thank you for those insights. I'm definitely going to take a look more closely at some of the data you put in there, because I think there's some really interesting follow-up we could do on that to learn more about the prison populations, the impact on the prison population of COVID. I think that's something to explore more fully later. How about you, Jennifer? I think there's one other thing you want to end this on a positive for us. What can you share with us?
I am extremely excited and happy. Many of you don't know this, but I have been every night praying and lighting candles, hoping that we would get Lao food in Humboldt County available in restaurants, and my prayers have been answered.
Right on.
The Hunan restaurant in Eureka. Well, I should first go back and say, do you remember the Hunan restaurant in Arcata? Yeah. I don't know how, I wasn't here for its heyday, I don't think. But everybody talks about how great it was, how amazing it was, but I always hear people talk about that after a place closes.
Right.
But anyway, people miss that place. People miss Hunan deeply. And so the father and son who worked there a long time ago, the Warrisons, Ronnie Warrison and his father, John Warrison, who are both members of our local Lao community, they have worked in a bunch of restaurants. And over the years, eventually, after 17 years in the business, Ronnie Warrison, who started in kitchens right out of high school, has found a place, Hunan in Eureka, which is over in Henderson Center and unrelated to Hunan in Arcata. However, it is his mission to, among other things, I think he put it as bring that sauce back.
Nice.
He wants to bring back that kind of classic Chinese restaurant in America flavor, classic dishes, like old school. Everybody here calls it chow mein, right? At home they called it lo mein. On the East Coast they call it lo mein, but it's
exactly
chow mein and
my favorite, brother.
Szechuan beef and like sweet and sour pork, all those things that you love, love, love. Everybody always says, oh, I want to eat, authentic Chinese, but most of the time what we're thinking about is classic American takeout Chinese. And so that's what he's doing, but he's also introducing Lao food. And that includes some things that might be familiar if you're not familiar with Lao cooking to begin with. And if you are, what a lucky person you are. And if you're not familiar, there are some things that are going to look to you like, oh, this is Thai food, like larb and papaya salad and fresh spring rolls and things like that, but they are different. The flavor profile is different. There's less emphasis on really sour, really sweet, and really creamy. The Thai is like always firing on all cylinders, and Lao food is a little more subtle and a little bit more herby. And there's a lot of different fresh herbs, along with cilantro. There's perilla, there's Lao basil. There are all these wonderful flavors. Yeah. And those all come through in these dishes. And there are also some wonderful things like khao pun, which is a very red, intimidatingly red noodle soup that's actually quite mild, but it's like a curry coconut broth with noodles and chicken, and it's just fantastic and just like soul feeding. The same for, there's even a dessert that is, these are all his mom's recipes. There's even a wonderful coconut and tapioca dessert. I know, it's like we're going to their house. It's so good. And, the family is trying this thing out, and they're happily surprised to find that Humboldt has an appetite for Lao food. both among people who are familiar with it and for people for whom it's new. There was a Lao restaurant a few years back, but right now there's nobody else doing it. So now that I know that I have the psychic power to manifest a cuisine in our county, I will be working on Portuguese.
Right on. So you said now. Does that mean they're open now?
Yes, they are open now and only doing takeout. They're just doing takeout, and it's absolutely wonderful. Can you do noodles in takeout? Yes, you can. Separate containers for noodles and soup.
Right on. So I'm going to check it out. Thank you, Jennifer. Actually, that's about all the time we have. So Thad and Jennifer, thank you both for filling us in on what to look for in North Coast Journal. Everyone out there listening and watching, you can check it out online. You can find it on newsstands. Pick one up, stay informed. And until next time, thanks again, guys. See you soon.
See you soon.